this video was put together to give you a student's perspective. So what does that mean? Well, when I was talking to a number of the research students in our group, the Machine Learning and Optimization group, and also Sam, who you'll see through in this slides a bit later, they said, well, what we need to know about you or any supervisor is these issues. So I'm going to try and address all the issues that a number of the students thought was important to selecting a supervisor. So that's why it's called a student's perspective. So let's look at the research areas that you could be studying or involved in if I was your supervisor. And here I'm just going to note in the top right hand corner that the IEEE has a subgroup called Computational Intelligence Society. And that society is involved with a broad range of artificial intelligence subdomains. And they also sponsor the IEEE a number of conferences, and the IEEE has the IEEE transactions on neural networks and the IEEE transactions on evolutionary computing, both high-level journals that you could probably publish in. So let's look at some research subdomains then. Maybe the major subdomain you'll be involved in is artificial intelligence. This has also been recently renamed computational intelligence because a computer is used to run the algorithmics and the models that undertake this simulation of artificial intelligence. And again, I just note that there is an IEEE Computational Intelligence Society which has a broad coverage of these areas. So computational intelligence then, what research areas do I cover and would you be involved in? Well, the first one is artificial neural networks. So investigating neural networks and the science involved in the study of those. And I'll go into a bit later my actual areas of interest in those. There's many more than I'm going to talk about, but this is just a top level description of the research subdomains. So the next area under the computational intelligence banner, as well as artificial neural networks, is evolutionary computing. And also massively parallel processing. So all of these can be combined together, and in fact the recent work myself and a number of students have undertaken does do that. But these are all linked with a major domain called mathematics. And who better to delineate it than Dr. Richard, or Professor Richard Feynman, as you'll see in the image here. So there's the sub areas that I look into, and you'll be investigating from computational intelligence with a subdomain of artificial neural networks, computational evolution, massively parallel processing, and they're all joined together with mathematics. So let's view these as a family tree of the research you'd be involved in, from the top level research domain of computational intelligence to the research subdomains that we've just mentioned. So now we're going to short form these so we can now look at the interests or the interests you might have in these areas, the subdomains under these, which you might study during your PhD. So I've short formed them to ANNs, EC, MPP and Maths. So before I do that, I thought I'd just quickly say that artificial intelligence has its ups and downs, particularly in neural networks. So I've got a picture on the top right of the perceptron, and on the left of the book Perceptrons, which cause quite a stir. It caused quite a stir because in some parts of the world that book stopped funding of the research area for 10 years. And in fact, it wasn't until Paul Verbos developed dynamic feedback, that's renamed backpropagation, that some of the problems mentioned in the book were given a solution. So artificial intelligence is the area you'll be studying if you become one of my students. So let's look at these now as interests that I have in these subdomains. So here they are then, under the banner of artificial neural networks. In the past, these are a few but not all. I've investigated generalization, also looked at adaptive learning techniques and symmetry. And then, under the banner of evolutionary computing, I've hybridized and joined requirement engineering and evolutionary computing into a, if you like, a hybrid of those. And then finally, the latest area I'm involved in with Hassan, which I think you'd find if you got involved with it, a very riveting area, because it combines every single hybrid methodology, every single computational technique, algorithm or process could be used in a hybrid portfolio or algorithm. So I'll just explain a bit about those, because the three words might be not explicit yet. So a hybrid is a combination, maybe one algorithm and another algorithm are combined in some way, either in parallel or sequentially. A portfolio could be a portfolio of different methodologies. So portfolios and algorithms are just saying that when you develop hybrid techniques, you're using different types of subdomain knowledge, maybe stochastic processing, maybe deterministic processing, maybe evolutionary computing, maybe gradient descent, and you're combining them. So all the areas you see in front of you can be hybridized, and that's a major area that solves a lot of computationally complex problems, which I, and thanks to Hussein, we're doing some research in that area. So now let's look at the subdomains in these areas and see the resultant, if you like, areas that have developed due to the research that I and my students have undertaken. Well, in the generalization subdomain, we've developed a taxonomy of generalization and even introduced a new generalization level or order called third order. In the adaptive learning regime, which looks at learning methodologies, learning techniques and algorithms, we've developed adaptive critic methodology. So adaptive critic is running two systems in parallel. One of the systems is critiquing the other. So it's a hierarchical system called the adaptive critique. Also symmetry. Symmetry is used across science, all across science, in mathematics, physics, everywhere. Here the symmetry we're talking about is mathematical symmetry that's used to enable reuse of information, and actually via symmetry transforms of matrices we can transform the weights and actually perform third order generalization, which implies first learning tasks and then using weight transforms and symmetry transforms to then map tasks that you didn't learn by transforming the weights of the neural network, hence the term third order. And then requirement engineering with the combination of evolutionary computing to undertake some requirement engineering problems. Finally, again addressing the idea of hybrids, portfolios and algorithms, we've developed algorithmics and compositions of those different algorithms, be they stochastic or deterministic, evolutionary computing or gradient descent type mechanisms, and we've also developed monitoring techniques and switching techniques to switch from one to the other sequentially. So Sam said, and some of the students said, you should really tell us or any potential student what mentoring you give. And in fact, I would rather be called a mentor, because mentoring is what building a scientist and you'll become a scientist is all about. So thank you, Sam. So what happens in your first year? Well, really the first thing we're going to look at is the research area, understanding it, building knowledge in that research area, thinking about what it is that this field is, reading a lot of papers. One of the things we're going to do is identify the research questions that you're going to find key during your first year that will drive you in certain ways. One of the ways it will drive you is we're going to get you to develop hypotheses, and the rationale for that is one of the methodologies and key strategic sequences, doesn't have to be followed, but it's a key way of undertaking science, is hypothesis-driven research development. So we're going to get you to write, after you've developed some questions, rewrite the questions as hypotheses or claims. And then we're going to get you to build mathematical models, algorithmics, and run experiments, and then analyze them. Now, what does this do? Well, all these areas improve your reading, your reviewing of information, journals, papers, and during the first year, you're going to be writing reports, so they'll be improving your technical skills. So what happens in the second year then? Well, we're going to be taking the research experimental techniques and building frameworks and undertaking the research at a more detailed and higher level. We're going to perform many, many more rigorous experiments. And I'm going to show you and give you techniques of how to do statistical sampling of your results and how to monitor your experiments and analyze the data. And this is extremely important when you're looking at building new algorithms, building new mathematics, writing down new axioms or lemmas while you're developing your research. Then hopefully in the second year, you might have something to say that you'd like to disseminate to other people, so you could start publishing. And when you submit your, say, a conference paper to a conference, you're going to start going through the peer review feedback process, which will really help you. All the mentoring I do will be really implicitly giving you feedback. All the undertaking for publishing your work in conferences, in journals, anywhere will involve, if you like, an evolution of the document, and we're going to evolve your, if you like, your evolutionary processing of your documentation skills, and I'm quite rigorous in the way I do that, and you're going to get used to how useful peer feedback can be from conferences and journals. What happens in the third year? Well, in the third year, we begin reviewing your previous 2 years and looking back and starting to write up, if you hadn't done already, which I will have got you to already do. So you'll be writing up more, you'll be reviewing me up more. I'll give you some processes for doing this, for building research relevant diagrams, one of the techniques I'll mentor you in. So while you're doing all this, you have to realize that you're going to really continue detailed literature reviewing. Hopefully, with the background of 2 years, you'll be solving more complex research problems and issues and building more complex mathematical models and developing more complex algorithmics. So the other thing that Sam and some of the students said was, well, couldn't we talk to some of your past students? So I asked a couple and they said yes. But before we do that, I'll just leave you, or I might even read out what some of my past students have said. And here's one of them. In 2007 they said this: I appreciate all the encouragement you gave us during the dissertation period. This has really improved my ability to do thorough research work and write technical papers. So thank you, NB. So the next one. I've learnt so much more from you than I have throughout the sixth form, plus first and second years of my degree. And that was a student, thank you, MU. Then another one said, I thank you for your enthusiasm, your passion. And that was another student, thank you, DA. Then another of my PhD students says, it was your input that transformed the whole presentation into a smooth, succinct and successful one. So that's after he did his PhD viva in his first year. And you have, remember, 2 of those, one in the first year and one in the second, and the final one in the third year, where you'll have an external involved as well. So here's another comment. everything I did not fully understand and had to ask clarification for was really well explained. And that's when I had to explain in a mentoring session to this student. So here's a couple of students you can contact. I'll just leave their emails up and I might even say them. So Hassan is a student of mine and you've got his email there, and Sam now is the guy I've been talking about all the way through this presentation, is now Dr. Sam, and there's his email so you can contact him as well. So publications. The student said, we'd like to know that you've published well. Okay, so let's talk about publications. Well, I've published single-authored 37 journals, conference papers and technical memorandums. Single author is quite important because it means I wasn't part of a group. Everything I did, I developed the maths, the algorithmics, the full understanding of the science area. So that will help you when I develop with you your journals and conference papers. And I use technical memorandums as an aid memoir to put lots of information down, which conferences and journals won't let you do because they have page restrictions. So technical memorandums are a way of storing information and then reformulating it in a shorter formulation for journals, or for an even shorter page number limit for conferences. So hopefully I've done a few of those. I've also published in 8 international journals. Hopefully that will give you, via mentoring, insight into the level required to publish in journals as well. Also been in 2 books, and I also have a patent for some of the science I've undertaken too. So in total about 100 publications. Hopefully that gives you an idea that I've written a few papers. So well known. Well, when one of the students, a few of them said, well, we need to know you're well known. I wasn't quite sure how you'd ever prove that. There's lots of ways to prove it. So I thought I'd start with saying, well, on the right, here's one of my international journals in neural networks, the INNS, International Neural Network Society, one of the top journals in our field. And I'm also a reviewer on that as well. And I thought I'd start telling you about Paul Verbos. So on the left is a picture of Paul Verbos, who developed backpropagation in his thesis. He called it dynamic feedback, and it's lately been called automatic differentiation. Paul was very kind to me in the fact that he sponsored me to become a senior member in the INNS as well. So, well known. Well, let's see where I could give you confidence as well. One of the other areas that might be informative to you is, well, here's one of the locations I went to a conference in, and this is Hong Kong. There's the conference centre you can see in the picture at the bottom. I'm on 11 international journals and as a reviewer. I've also been a conference reviewer panel member for many years, and I've been a conference chair in several conferences. So I also thought I'd tell you about the fact that due to Paul being very kind, he sponsored me to be a senior member of the INNS, which is a leading society in neural networks. And I also thought I'd show you one of my other neural network papers as well. In fact, it's in the same field that Paul Verbos published in as well. It's the adaptive critique. So let's talk about weekly supervisor meetings. Again, I have to thank Sam for this. He said that this is an issue we need to tell students about because it's very important that they understand we could have regular daily meetings in the first few weeks and then move on to weekly later. But there will be regular mentoring sessions. So what will happen in these? Well, really, there'll be frequent meetings, maybe daily, maybe weekly, covering numerous issues. So over the 3 years. I've got about 30 explicit mentoring techniques and methodologies that I've got to impart to you. They could start with research planning and then research progression. And also I give you methodologies like tabulation of bibliographies and hypothesis development processes. So these will all come out in the initial daily and then weekly meetings. And what I try and give you is a systematic approach with a set of techniques to support it to developing you as a scientist. Developing you by giving you efficient and effective mentoring in all levels of science, be it mathematics, be it axiom building, algorithm building, mathematical model building, journal writing, conference paper writing. All these areas will sit down together one-to-one and develop your skill set. So I thought I'd finish with, if you weren't sure about some of the fields, I'd let you read what they are. These are just very short descriptions of some of the fields I'm in. And I thought I'd finish by saying what I haven't explained much about is the mathematics that we utilize. And really some of it could be computational algebra. Lately I've used it over about 15 years now, automatic differentiation. Could be initially called dynamic feedback by Paul Verbos. He calls it ordered derivatives. When I once said to him, did you know about automatic differentiation? He said, yes, those guys call what I did something slightly different to what I called it. He called it ordered derivatives. And then I thought I'd start listing some of the mentoring techniques, methodologies, systematic processes that I teach you. And you can take away to your research students as well. There's too many for me to go through them. So I'm just listing a few here that you can parse on the screen. And here's a few more. So I think that's just about it. Hopefully that's given you a student's perspective of Richard Neville as a supervisor. And I'd like to thank you for listening to this. Any more queries, questions, issues at all, don't hesitate to contact me. Don't hesitate to email me, even ring me. I'll tell you anything you need to know. So thank you very much for listening to this video. The last thing I'd like to say is you can also investigate multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary projects, as you've seen when I did requirement engineering and AI using EC. I've also looked at symmetry and other areas as well. Any area that's interdisciplinarily using AI, we could talk about you being a student of mine. So thank you very much for listening to this video.